Welcome to the In Shape Fitness Show. I'm Coach Kim. Thank you so much for joining me. Today's podcast is called Solving Our Metabolic Mystery. Metabolic conditions negatively impact the lives of almost all of us, hundreds of millions of Americans of all ages and races and income levels. We are storing more body fat in our sedentary lives and thus developing pain and suffering as we cope with the limited use of our body, particularly our limbs, and the limitations of our vital organ function. So let's talk about that. It's a really complicated subject and we can't get it all done in about a 30-minute podcast, but we're going to start talking about some of the ways for you to understand some of the more simple parts of the concept and thus hopefully make some adjustments in the way that you live. I don't do very much with respect to food, nutrition, hydration, or whatever in my line of work. There are so many good, great nutrition experts and dietitians that are out there on the market, and In Shape Fitness focuses on movement. And I wrote a book that will go to market sometime soon in the next couple of months called Darwin on the Treadmill that states that over and over again because I want to make sure that I don't sort of delve into an area that it really isn't our specific expertise. But of course, movement and energy input are really related. And that is what metabolism is. At its essence, your metabolism is all of the chemical processes that are going on inside of your body that relates to the stuff that goes into your body and the stuff that comes out of your body, and then what happens to it when you know, in between there, you know, the movement of your body and the function of your body's vital organs and tissues. So I call it the fitness that we cannot see, and it's a small portion of the book, but it is a portion of the book where I try to break the process down a little bit in a very simple understanding of how, you know, human movement that largely took place from when gyms didn't exist, before our obesity crisis in the United States, before the prescription drug ballooning medical intervention trend that we have in the United States, and along with the foundational basics that lay out an organization for human movement that anyone can use to construct this is back to what we normally do, short daily regimens. The focus on my focus on body parts and things that you can do, that you can see, movements that you do, habits that you can make a part of your life on an everyday basis. But there is this metabolic word that people throw around and use a lot, but it really does need a slightly deeper, more explanation for it to be understood and therefore changed a little bit. Take a couple of deep breaths, though, and let's do a quick postural systems check. I do like to start the podcast with this because, if nothing else, one beneficial component to your listening to a podcast, if you're sitting down or not really busy doing anything specific, is to get some of the noise out of your brain, to think about the exchange of air coming into your body and going out of your body. That's part of your metabolism too. It's not just hydration and food or food products, as it were, for a lot of Americans, but also the uptake of oxygen, right? The inhaling of air into your nose, hopefully. And we talk a lot about how the specifics of inhaling through your nose versus inhaling through your mouth affect the quality of respiration on the inside of your body. But that component, the postural systems check, coupled with you're taking a couple of moments to think about your inhale deeply and your exhale deeply, bellow the carbon dioxide, that waste gas out of your mouth forcefully in order to help stimulate the use of your lungs and your diaphragm, which is a muscle in your chest that will also trigger metabolic processes on the inside of your body. So fitness that we cannot see is really where fitness is real long-term, sustainable fitness takes shape. And we talked a little bit about We talk generally about the different components, the different ways we break exercise movements down in terms of their purpose. So I talk about balance a lot. I talk about bending a lot. I talk about pivoting a lot. And one of the main components that in any of your workouts, your hopefully daily home-based or maybe conference room-based workouts that you do every day, is something called interacting with gravity. Interacting with gravity is any exercise, and exercises, by the way, can include more than one purpose, but where the primary purpose, for example, in a squat would be to lower the body down and lift the body back up. And that is interaction with gravity. And gravity is that physical force that we take for granted on Earth every day, and that we consider the bane of our existence when we age and wrinkles start to develop. But honestly, it's something that's really important in terms of your movement patterns, because when you lower your body down and then you have to use the tissues, the soft tissues, and the structure of your limbs to lift your body back up, you are resisting a physical force called gravity, and thus stimulating cells at the cellular level to activate in order to make that movement happen. That is metabolism. That is triggering the stimulation inside of your body that will help you boost your metabolism. You probably heard that a million times, right? Boosted metabolism. But it has to do with not just, your cardio workout versus lifting weights versus going on to a spin class versus going to a yoga class. It has to do with the processes on the inside of your body that will be activated by a greater amount of effort. And of course, we'll get, as I said before, a little bit today into the food components, because I want to make sure that you understand a little bit about the two parts of metabolism and how our food habits are negatively impacting the way that our bodies work. But poorly functioning metabolism truly is the root of our modern health concerns, because successful and sustainable daily operations governing our bodily selves governs every single part of our lives. It governs our sense of fatigue. It governs how we feel when we wake up, how many times we hit the snooze button. It governs what we do, how quickly we can move, how organized we are in our brain function in terms of being able to move through the day with some pattern and sort of sense of control over our environment and our existence. It is not easy. The science part is really, really complicated, and it involves biology, it involves chemistry, and it involves physics, and I don't understand it well enough to explain it to you. However, it's still really important to understand that just 30 years ago, just a couple of generations ago, when people started putting on those few extra pounds, we were not all overweight just a couple of generations ago. Most people were maybe not bikini body ready and ripped ab, attractive or sculpted shoulders or whatever. But we were not overweight the way we are now. It might have been, a little too much cheese or beer at the holidays or sweets. Maybe a little too much sitting around during the winter months when it gets cold. Hey honey, your spouse might have said after a doughy hug, maybe it's time to lay off the whatever. And feeling maybe some bashfulness about hitting the bathing suit season, or the conversations around the water cooler at the office that might have been the stimulation to get you to do a little more moving around, but it wasn't the way that it is now. And guess what, moms? And I am, of course, you probably know, because I talk about my daughter all the time. Moms have had it so far worse, because especially moms that stay at home. Now, moms that are working have it worse in a different way, but moms staying at home with kids being fed throughout the day and this sort of idea that we need to have kid-friendly food in the house, it's hard to be careful. It's impossible really to be completely careful. The impulse to then make everything on the go in the last couple of decades has wreaked havoc on our bodies. It used to be a village to raise a family in a community, generally providing for the sort of basic components of providing for an awareness of overeating and spending too little time maybe moving around. But now we're so nuclear. People are not in the home anymore to eat. And we're certainly not moving around anymore. I was just reading an article in The Atlantic about this sort of really unhealthy compulsion that we have. While our incomes are stagnant, and we're a lot of Americans are doing worse than they were even a decade ago. This compulsion to work, to be at work, to be on all the time has driven us away from fun activities, recreational activities outside of the homes, outside of our physical spaces where we're confined with a screen and a device and trying to, get ahead and be productive, to this, really, really sedentary existence. And this is very difficult for the human health that we need to sustain if we're going to continue as a race. So not to be so fatalistic, but it is really important that you understand. Now, as I said before, I also we did a postural systems check, but we really just covered the breathing. So now I want you to take a couple of seconds. We're about 11 minutes in here. Take a couple of seconds to think about your body parts, particularly your head. Where is your physical head? Where your brain is, maybe a completely different story, but where is your physical head right now? Is it sitting on top of your shoulders? I always laugh when I talk about this because I really find it amazing if you begin to look at people, observe people around you. And again, this is thin people, overweight people, young people, older people, particularly older people, people of all races, ages, income levels. What I notice all the time, and I live in a city with almost 9 million people, New York City, our heads are craning forward. Our heads are kind of reaching forward, and we're reaching forward for a couple of reasons. Our heads are craning away from the standard, the neutral position that it's supposed to be in, because we're typing on devices, because we're typing on keyboards, because we're steering with a wheel in a car, because we're looking at a screen at a computer on a desk. So the head, which weighs about 10 pounds, maybe 10 to 12, or maybe a little bit less if you're smaller, obviously. But most people I know and that I train in New York City as private clients have a hard time carrying a 10-pound medicine ball. But this is the weight of your human head. And by virtue of this craning of the neck, number one, you're pulling on the muscles in the back of your neck and your upper back. You're collapsing the muscles on the front of your chest and in the front of your neck and throat. And you're altering your center of gravity, which means that you are more susceptible to lose your balance. You're more susceptible to deviate from a healthy vestibular system, your sort of equilibrium, and you are definitely more susceptible to pain and suffering through this deviation of your posture. So when you are sitting in your chair, standing up tall, take a couple of moments to think about where your ears are lined up relative to your shoulders. They should be one straight line from your shoulders to your ears. And that allows your head to be a proper ballast for your center of gravity. And that is huge. It also, because you're pushing your head back, it opens up your chest, your shoulders go back, and then your breathing is more efficient and higher quality. So just those two little things make a huge difference in the quality of your day. Now, I want to get back to metabolism because I really want to make sure. I've learned this over the period of researching my book and just wanting to have a tiny little bit in the book about the way this works, because it is mysterious to a lot of people. As I said before, people throw the word metabolism around, and it's a catch-all for, everything diet and sort of exercise related. Boost your metabolism, that'll solve everything. And we know that that's not really the case, because we know that there are a lot of people that don't exercise at all and are thin. We know a lot of people that are really devout exercisers and struggle to get the weight off. But metabolism is always in play, always, 24 hours a day. It's in play when you're sleeping. It's in play when you're awake. And it is broken down into 2 sub-processes. And I want to briefly try to get through them. They're a little sciencey, but I do think it's important. One, the first thing is called catabolism. Catabolism. It's the breaking down of the stuff that goes into your body that you can put to use. And that's the other part, of course, is the anabolism, is the putting stuff together so that your body can put it to actual use, because nothing is in usable form when you take it in. So the simple digestion is the first part, and that means that when you eat stuff, food goes into your body. It has to be digested, right? The idea is that, and you've probably seen this in like maybe 5th, 6th, 8th grade science, food goes into your mouth. Saliva and enzymes in your mouth, combined with the chewing motion of your teeth, break food down, and then the food is swallowed and it goes down into your stomach, through your esophagus into your stomach, where digestive juices, more chemicals and enzymes and saliva break apart the food into lots of bacteria, lots of microbes, break the food apart into nutrients, and that then move on into the rest of the body, into the bloodstream. So you get this lesson in school, but here's the problem. Well, there are a couple of problems. First, the first part of the problem is the chewing. And I mean, this is kind of crazy, but it really is kind of remarkable when you think about it. The chewing part is a really significant part of the metabolic process. It's like, chewing the food, which activates the hormones in the glands in your neck and throat, sending enzymes into the digestive system, is a vital part of your metabolism. But guess what we're doing less and less of? Chewing. Number one, we have food that's really soft. Doesn't need to be chewed very much. Number two, we are drinking a lot of our calories. And that is just plain simple bad. All those highly processed foods, not the same as chewing on things that come out of the earth. Hopefully, I'm not a vegetarian. I eat meat, but the less meat you eat, the better. So mostly we should be eating vegetative food products. I like to refer them as victuals because I think that's a fun word to say. And when I say the word victuals, I mean like things like carrots and turnips and beets and peppers and cucumbers. I'm a huge fan of tomatoes. Now, we want our kids to eat those foods, don't we? But guess what? Our kids are not going to eat stuff that we don't eat ourselves. So whenever I'm very involved in the public school system in New York City, whenever I get involved in a conversation that has to do with school food, I get really revved up about this. None of this matters if the adults around the kids are eating crappy foods or sucking on bars or, sucking down their juices and eating their, mushed up bars because they're in a hurry and they don't have time to grab a carrot out of the refrigerator. I mean, come on. It's kind of crazy, but it is a significant roadblock to a metabolic process that is efficient and high quality if you're not actually eating food. Food. Not food products, but the actual ingredients. So that's catabolism. Now, The anabolism and cellular respiration is a little more sciencey, and I think that one of the best ways to describe it is I guess I'll just talk about it. Okay, so the next phase where in catabolism, so we'll get back before we get to anabolism, where problems really surface is because we're not sending in the right ingredients to our digestive system, into our stomachs. We're not providing the body with the proper tools, the proper ingredients to fuel the cellular respiration and the other sort of cellular processes that make up the burn of calories that is so required by your body in order to prevent it from storing fat. So for most adults, what that means is that you're sending a bunch of gooey gunk into your stomach. So just sort of there was that a couple of years ago, a lot of news around the pink sludge that meat products sometimes has, and try to think of it like a Play-Doh where, if that's what's going into your stomach, then the resulting processes are going to be trying to use that sludge to do things that really require much more sort of refined and highly high quality ingredients. It's like the gooey gunk, which is basically pasta and rice and bread and crackers and food bars or whatever. It should be the mise en place, like the sort of the basic ingredients that prepare our cells to generate blood, right? The blood cells have to replicate over and over and over and over and over again, billions of times, in order to continue to pump blood into our system. Muscles have to function and replace themselves. Skin cells have to be replaced. Your digestive tract lining has to be maintained and has to be replaced, and so on. So all this stuff is happening, but it can't distribute the elements into the bloodstream that it really needs because it isn't getting the right parts. And this haywired catabolism leads to the storage of a lot of the useless materials, otherwise known as fat production. And that is, one of the main reasons why we are so overweight. In the book, describe it as it relates to, I actually go so far as in the book to describe it to the personal storage industry, all those little units, those buildings that have like closets where you can go and store all of your unwanted stuff. And it's kind of interesting to me that I was realizing, because I looked this up, it was just a couple of generations ago. Like when I was a kid, if we didn't have enough stuff, when our rooms got full, we put stuff in the attic. Now, on average, Americans live in much bigger homes. In New York City, that's not the case. But in most parts of this country, we actually we're living in bigger places, but we have so much more stuff. So just a few generations ago, we would throw things out if we had extra stuff. Nowadays, what people do is rent storage units to just keep their extra stuff. And I kind of feel like the human body is doing the same thing, because what happens when you store extra fat in your body is that you have this whole sort of like ancillary set of processes that have to kind of cater to that extra tissue in your body. Your fat supply needs a blood supply. It needs, climate control. It needs nerve endings. The feedback loop has to develop for almost a completely new organ, your storage body fat. And that's one of the most concerning needs in terms of excess demand that is placed on your vital organs in terms of your overweight, someone's overweight condition. So it's a booming industry, personal storage, externally storage. And to a certain degree, the pharmaceutical companies and lots of big exercise companies are booming as well, because we can't seem to figure out how to let some of this stuff go. Inflammation, turning a little bit of a different page here, inflammation is another part of the provides a link to understanding the other part of metabolism. And so I'm going back now to anabolism, which is also called constructive metabolism. And it's the opposite, or rather the reconstruction of the parts of the body that all of our human bodies need in terms of function, right? So nutrients, even the most sustainable natural vegetation and basic animal products have to be reconstructed for use in the human body. Human body functions, particularly in the brain, and a lot of your metabolism, a lot of your metabolic energy, it goes to your head. It goes to that heavy head that you have. But the other parts of the body that really require these functions are your lungs, your ability to ambulate, use your feet to move without a tail, like most of the other mammals in the animal kingdom. And then, of course, there's some earlier things like early development after birth. These are all really unusual attributes of human existence. And these unique features demand a really sophisticated nutrient profile. The stuff that goes into your body has to be able to construct and maintain these essential functions. Without these proper working parts, your anabolism is going to get reactionary. It's becoming less effective. It's impossible to understand and really act on without kind of letting your creative mind sort of think about the significance. But, once we reach adulthood, we don't grow anymore physically, but inside of your body, the stuff that you cannot see, it is continually changing. Your skin is replacing every couple of weeks. Your red blood cells only live 3 or 4 months. You have to replicate that blood supply all the time. And this is why contributions to your newly hatching cells is such a vital concern. It's also why, and I won't talk about this today, why your microflora, the microbes in your body, why the sort of hosting your care of all of the bacteria in your body is another big part of your sustainable lifestyle. But you cannot construct a house without walls or a floor or a roof, and you can't make the basic parts, even for our resilient bodies, without the products that will do the jobs that were meant to be done every day in our human bodies. So those are the two parts of metabolism. And now I want to finish with a couple of exercises, because one of the things, as I said before, I always like to do a postural systems check and some deep breathing exercises for the podcast. And a lot of the podcasts I do are really just exercise regimens. I didn't want to do that today because I really did want to talk to the issue of metabolism. I've been getting a couple of requests for it, and I'm happy to answer questions about it if you get in touch with me at our website at bodybyInShape.com. In fact, the other thing I'm going to do, it's not super complicated because there are a couple of websites that have an algorithm so that you can put your height and weight and activity level in to see what your sort of base caloric intake should be for your human daily, your daily operation. But I will post that formula to our website so that you can see that on our blog post a little later today. But ask me questions about metabolism if you get a chance. But in the meantime, what I want you to do is to just stand up for a couple of seconds and take a big step forward with your left leg. And now I want you to bend the left knee, keep the right leg straight, and put your hands on the floor, one on the left side of your left foot, one on the right side of your left foot. And just hold this position for a couple of seconds. This is a simple runner's sprint. And what it does is it stretches out the hip flexor in your right leg. Now, if you haven't been doing any movement today and you want to jog around a little bit, maybe do a couple of jumping jacks before you get into the runner's lunge. Did I say runner's sprint? I meant a runner's lunge. That's totally fine. But this position allows you to stretch out that right hip flexor a little bit, which is always contracted and tight because of the number of hours that you spend sitting all day. And then if you take your left hand and slowly lift it to the left and up towards your ceiling, point your left fingertips towards your ceiling and look up at your fingertips. It forces your neck to turn. It forces your body to twist a little bit. And it is a really great way to stretch out some of the internal glute and hip muscles that, again, are just victims to our sedentary lives. Then put your hand back down on the floor and switch legs. Complete the same thing on the right leg. Now, the last thing I'm going to leave you with as you finish the right side here, remember to lift your right hand up into the air and turn your head so that you're gazing at your right fingers. Once you get back down, I've got 2 more things I want you to do, but I'm going to go because it's 30 minutes in and I promise to be finished around 30 minutes. I want you to hold a plank for 30 seconds to 60 seconds every day. You should be holding a plank every single day, and then spend another 60 seconds moving your feet while you're in the plank. Whether you move them side to side or up underneath, forward and back, doesn't matter. Just move in that plank position. Try to keep your butt down as low as possible. Hold it for 60 seconds. Keep breathing. Inhale through your nose, exhale through your mouth. And I'll see you again very soon for another episode of the In Shape Fitness Show. Have a great day.